Thank you so much to MPB for sponsoring this video. So let's talk about the Fujifilm X100v. It's probably the most sought after camera in the world right now, with the 6 being even harder to find. It's no doubt that it's a beautiful camera, but is it overhyped? Has the social media, the stylish design, and the general scarcity created a bit of a frenzy? That's what I want to find out in this video. So let's check it out. This camera is blooming gorgeous. It's so striking. I prefer the black on black version, but there is a silver version as well. You have a mechanical dial for your ISO, shutter speed, and aperture, so you can just get a really tactile experience, and it's sort of going back to basics as well. And if you're quite new to photography, you can whack them all in auto mode and let the camera do everything for you. So this is a great camera regardless of where you are in your photography journey. This is so much harder to do in Tokyo versus Osaka. Oh well, it's a change of pace, isn't it? We've got a wonderful fixed lens, and with the APS-C crop, it works out at 35mm, and it's an f2 aperture as well. So nice and sharp, nice and bright, and generally a joy to use. The added benefit of this is it makes the camera very small in a sideways profile, so I wouldn't say it's pocketable, but it's certainly very, very manageable as an everyday carry. I personally like to stick it on a little sort of shoulder strap and wear it like a handbag. Godzilla. And along with the form factor, it weighs just 478 grams, which is incredible given that it's made of pure metal. You've got a magnesium alloy body and then an aluminium top. So very robust, but also quite light as well. Best of both worlds. I think the weather sealing on this camera is a little bit confusing. There are rubber seals around all of the doors, but I've heard conflicting things online, and there is a kit that you can buy from Fujifilm that enhances the weather sealing. So I've taken it out in Osaka in a little bit of rain. For an everyday carry sort of camera, I think the weather sealing is more than enough, but I wouldn't push it too far, is all I'm saying. One element of street photography that I love is doing handheld long exposures. I do it all the blooming time, especially when I'm around traffic and especially at night. Unfortunately, with the X100v, there is no ibis built in, no stabilization at all, in fact. So I had a couple of attempts to make the shutter a little bit longer, but yeah, this is not the camera for that. I think the lack of stabilization also makes the very minimal video features very minimal, because really to get good video out of this, you're gonna need to be leaning on something or using a tripod. And also how you actually access the video is not the most intuitive. It's hidden in the drive menu, so I really don't think video is any sort of priority for this camera at all. I'm quite right, because it's photocentric and it's amazing. We have a 26 megapixel APS-C sensor in this, so you can crop in a little bit, but not too much. It's more than enough if the 35mm focal length is just a little bit wide and you just want to crop in a little bit more, but I think they've really enhanced this feature on the 6, the X100 because that has a stupidly high megapixel count, so cropping in is a more viable option with the newer version of this camera. One of the absolute best things about this camera is the viewfinder. It's one of the most impressive viewfinders I've ever seen. It's an optical electronic sort of hybrid viewfinder. I'm not sure how you would describe it. You're looking through it optically, but you can see all of your settings electronically imprinted around it. It's absolutely so cool. Even though the camera is really classic looking, when I look through the viewfinder, I'm like, this is a camera from the future. Having said that, I tend to use the screen more often than not, and shooting from the hip, and even shooting without looking with this camera is very easy, because once you learn the fixed focal length, you can shoot and get pretty accurate composition without taking too much time about it. But the viewfinder is always amazing to have, and I know it's a deal breaker for a lot of people. So this is a camera that has not only a viewfinder, but a blooming amazing one at that. So using the fixed dials for the shutter speed, etc., was a slight learning curve, but I actually ended up really gelling with the process. At first, I was so used to just using one of the back or front dials to change my shutter speed that I found that I was missing shots because I was looking down at the camera, trying to move the dial. And I quickly realized once you are in shutter speed priority with this camera, the back dial actually is really intuitive. So say you're at 1/25th of a second on the fixed dial at the top. The back dial will allow you to go a couple of notches down and a couple of notches up. And usually that's all you need to get the perfect shutter speed for any given scenario. If you want to move beyond that, then you do need to move the dial to something else. But I found it very, very intuitive overall. And mechanical shutter fans rejoice. This camera has a leaf mechanical shutter that's built into the lens itself, which helps keep the form factor down. Also very, very quiet indeed. Fixed lens bonuses. The quiet nature of this camera for street photography is blooming brilliant as well, because you're not going to be clicking and clacking away in front of people, and you still get some sort of tactical feedback when you're using it. So it's the best of both worlds. It feels mechanical and wonderful, but it's also incognito. One issue that I had initially with this camera was because I'd got some custom recipes into the camera, I was finding that they were saving to the camera quite sluggishly. And thankfully in the comments of my previous video, which is all about recipes versus real-time LUT, people in the comments said that if you use clarity in a recipe, then it slows the whole process down. So I've took clarity out of the recipe and everything is much faster now, I'm happy to say. I do have a dedicated video on real-time LUT versus recipes, so I'll not linger on the recipes too much in this video, but I put a couple of good ones in. One is Reggie's recipe, I think it's called, and one is from Mike Chudley, which is also lovely. I found putting them in, using them very, very intuitive. I've enjoyed having something quick and easy to share when I'm out and about in Tokyo and Osaka, and being able to take the recipes off the camera and just share them straight away online with a more stylized look is very, very useful. I can see why people love recipes. If you particularly like the film look, then the emulation in this camera, or the film simulation I should say, is absolutely second to none. I had one evening of user error where I completely underexposed everything, and the RAW files have pulled it back no problem whatsoever. So there's plenty of detail in the RAW files. Even though it's APS-C, which is a bigger sensor than what I'm used to, I don't think it's that great in low light. I think I've been sort of spoiled on this trip because I've been shooting with the Lumix S9, which is full frame and can basically see in the dark. So it's average in low light, and if you expose it correctly, it's great. If you underexpose it and make mistakes like I did from time to time, you can pull things back. The autofocus was an interesting beast in this camera because the screen is in focus, but sometimes it feels like the lens takes a split second longer to sort of catch up with what the camera is telling it. It's strange. I think the software is good, but the lens is somehow slowing it down. If you have this camera, do you agree with me on that? Let me know your AF thoughts below. On the whole, it's been dead snappy and I've not really missed many images, but it just seems like it's a little bit of like a communication lag between the camera and the lens sometimes. One place where this camera is not sluggish at all is turning it on and getting ready to shoot. You can get the camera on and ready to shoot in just a couple of seconds. I'm the kind of shooter when I'm traveling that I would rather turn the camera off and on as needed to preserve battery life. And sometimes if a camera turns on a little bit slowly, it's a pain in the backside. So this was great. I could extend the battery life significantly by just turning it off for extended periods of time and just turning it on whenever I need to take a photo. So I think the main deciding factor on whether this camera is for you or not is whether you like a fixed lens versus interchangeable lens, and also whether you like a 35mm focal length if you do want a fixed lens. I personally, as much as I've enjoyed using this camera, have missed the versatility of being able to change lenses, because I've been finding in the last 12 months I've done a good amount of traveling and some places suit certain focal lengths. Let me explain. When I was in LA and Seattle, I found that 50mm and above worked brilliantly because everything is in blocks and the streets are so straight and everything is so far away from you. You have to literally be on top of someone to get a candid street photograph with 35mm in those sorts of cities. However, in the UK, when I sort of walk around Liverpool, I love 35mm or 40mm because I think everything's just a little bit more close quarters in the UK and you can get the shots that you want from that focal length. When it comes to just out and about friends and family sort of stuff, I think 35mm is stunning. It's great for little group photos, it's great for, you know, selfies even. And if you are documenting your life or your family with this camera, 35mm is probably a good choice. So it's pros and cons. I think if you have one fixed focal length and you use it day in and day out, you live and breathe it and learn how to see it with your eyes and your mind before you even pick the camera up. So things start to become second nature when you use the same focal length over and over, and there's so many benefits to that. You can also get a very distinct style if you use the same focal length over and over. But I think for the things that I do personally, where I am traveling to different places, I personally prefer interchangeable lenses just for the versatility. And that's why I love Micro Four Thirds, because all the lenses are tiny. But I don't need to tell you about that already on this channel because, well, that's what this channel is all about. Thank you so much to MPB for sponsoring this video. If you are in the market for an X100v or anything else, if you want to give your kit a bit of a shake-up, then MPB is the world's largest platform to buy, sell and trade all of your used camera equipment. I use them all the blooming time. If you want to sell any of your existing equipment with MPB, you don't even need to leave your house. It could not be easier. You just go to the website, get a quote, and then it's all done for you. A courier will come to your door and pick it up for you. They make everything super, super simple, and the quotes are always very competitive as well. I've even had people message me saying that the quotes that they get initially, once MPB have examined their equipment, they've upped the quote. Like, they're such a good company in that respect. And everything that you buy from them has a 6-month warranty for a little bit of peace of mind as well. If you are interested in checking out the X100v on the MPB website, check out in the links below. They're a worldwide company. I love them, and thank you to them once again for sponsoring this video. As I've alluded to, the video side of this camera is a little bit underwhelming. It's hard to even get into the video mode, and you do have a mic input, but it's a 2.5mm jack input, so you have to get an adapter to use a microphone as well. So that and the no stabilization thing, I've pretty much written video off for this camera. But in all honesty, I don't think anyone's buying this for the video features. It's nice to have a couple of clips if you're out and about, but people are buying this for photo-centric, and that's what it excels at, and that's what makes it such a joy to use. So is it worth the hype? Let's go back to my original question. I think for the price, objectively, if you look at it as like spec list only, you can get a heck of a lot better cameras for the same price, because this is basically the same price as like the new one, and it's a little bit older now. But when you take out the specs and all the mathematics and all that stuff, and you start thinking with your heart, because this is creating art at the end of the day, and it is a lot more than what a spec sheet suggests. If you gel with a camera, you are more likely to go out and use it, you're more likely to be inspired, you're more likely to improve as a photographer. And in that way, in that intangible way, I do think this camera is really worth the hype. I've thoroughly enjoyed using it. It hasn't been the best focal length every time in Japan, as I've said, for my own tastes. But for documenting my travels, having fun, I think it's such a great everyday carry option, and I can totally see why people love this camera. So there might be a small learning curve if you're coming from a camera that has fewer physical dials. It may be a little bit of an adjustment with your composition if you're coming from interchangeable lenses versus a fixed focal length. But all of these things are such a small barrier to entry. I think this camera is superb. I'm hoping one day I will be able to find one that is not costing an arm and a leg, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. I think as an overall photo-centric sort of proposition, it's quite tough to beat. And I think it's going to be quite tough to beat for a long time to come. Check out these videos next for more everyday carry choices.